Excellencies, distinguished guests, good evening. It is a privilege to have with us today the European Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, the Rule of Law, and Consumer Protection, Michael McGrath. Commissioner McGrath, a very warm welcome to Singapore. We've got the sun out specially for you. On behalf of all of us, our hosts at the Singapore Management University and the European Union delegation to Singapore, thank you indeed for making time for this conversation. We are very much looking forward to your keynote address and the rich discussions that are going to follow. A full room, lots of students in the room, and we're very happy to see that today. My name is Deepika Shetty. I'm the press officer at the EU delegation to Singapore. My honor to be your MC for today's proceedings. To start us off, it gives me great privilege to invite our host, Professor Pasha Sher. He's Professor of Law and Jean Monnet Chair in EU-ASEAN Law and Relations. For those of you who are probably unfamiliar with the Jean Monnet Chair, Professor Sher has been doing incredible and inspiring work with it. The Jean Monnet Chair is a prestigious teaching post that is awarded for 3 years to professors specializing in EU studies, and we have in you a very great friend of the European Union. So over to you.
Thank you. Commissioner Michael McGrath, Ambassador Ioana Pioko, Professor Li Pei Wan, Dean of the SMU Yong Peng House School of Law, esteemed ambassadors and high commissioners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As the Jean Monnet Chair at Singapore Management University, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this very significant event on empowering businesses and consumers in the digital age, which features a conversation with Commissioner McGrath. At SMU Yong Peng House School of Law, we are committed to nurturing the next generation of legal professionals and thought leaders. Through our rigorous academic programs, cutting-edge research, and dedication to public service, we equip our students with the skills and knowledge needed to engage meaningfully with regional and global challenges. As part of our Jean Monnet Chair program, we have developed a course on EU, ASEAN, law and relations. Following the innovative SMUX model, this course brings our students to visit EU institutions in Brussels and enables them to collaborate with EU experts. We are particularly grateful to Ambassador Ioana Pioko, EU Ambassador to Singapore, for her long-standing support. A key strength of our research, which is highly relevant to today's discussion, is our Center for Digital Law, led by our distinguished colleagues, Director Professor Jason Grant Allen, and Deputy Director Professor Han-Wei Liu. As we gather today to explore the critical issues of digital policies, we recognize the urgent need for dialogue to promote fair competition, innovation, and consumer protection. In an era of digital transformation and shifting geopolitical paradigms, these discussions are more important than ever. We believe that Commissioner McGrath's insights will deepen our understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead. Today's discussion will also contribute to the ongoing development of ASEAN and Singapore's digital trade agreements and further strengthen our partnership with the European Union. We are very honored and delighted to host this event at SMU, which reinforces our law school's position at the forefront of these crucial conversations. I look forward to our fruitful discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sher. And next, my honor to welcome on stage the European Union Ambassador to Singapore, Ioana Pioko. Ambassador, please.
Dean Lee, Professor Sher, our thanks for hosting us at your university. It is only fitting that the conversation with Michael McGrath, European Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, the Rule of Law and Consumer Protection, takes place at the Singapore Management University Center for Digital Law. Fellow ambassadors, distinguished guests, faculty, students, Singapore and the European Union may be far apart geographically, but we have enduring links. We are bound by trade and investment, connectivity of all kinds, cultural links, and people-to-people exchanges, and increasingly our economic and strategic security. Three things. Trade in goods and services is flourishing between us. A dividend from the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement that has been in place for more than 5 years. Cooperation in a number of digital technology areas has increased under the EU-Singapore Digital Partnership, established 2 years ago. And taking things further, we concluded negotiations of a digital trade agreement in July last year. This will help give our businesses legal certainty in the digital economy. Singapore and the European Union uphold shared values, such as multilateralism, the rule of law, and economic openness. These values are being tested by the unprecedented speed of technological transformation led by digital transformation, compounded by the growing uncertainties in the world. In this context, also in this year, when we celebrate 60 years of Singapore's independence, its many remarkable achievements and our multifaceted ties, we are glad that Commissioner McGrath chose Singapore as one of his very first destinations outside the EU. We are grateful that he accepted to share in a public forum his perspective and agenda related to the digital dimension of his responsibilities and how it may affect all of us, either as businesses or consumers. I very much look forward to these discussions. Thank you once again, all of you, for joining us, and I wish you all an insightful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Pureco, for reminding us of all the momentous moments we have to celebrate, and a very special one, of course, with the Commissioner. Commissioner McGrath has specific responsibility for upholding the rule of law, protecting democracy and fundamental rights, tackling disinformation, improving criminal justice cooperation, and strengthening the rights of victims of crime, and improving EU competitiveness through the reform of company law and civil law. Commissioner McGrath has lead responsibility for consumer protection policy for almost 450 million consumers in the European Union and works to ensure full enforcement of the General Data Protection Regulation and promoting trusted data flows with international partners. Distinguished guests, please join me in welcoming Commissioner McGrath.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction, and good evening, everyone. Dear Dean Lee, dear Ambassador Pureco, dear Professor Shea, dear ambassadors, distinguished guests and students, it is a great privilege to be with you all here this afternoon, and I want to thank you for the opportunity that you have afforded to me to say a few words, and I look forward to our discussion later on. This is, as the Ambassador has said, one of my first missions outside of the European Union, but it's also my first time in Singapore, and I have to say I am deeply impressed by the warm welcome, by the beauty of Singapore itself. We had some time yesterday, thankfully, to have a look around some of the sites, including the Gardens by the Bay, which is absolutely spectacular. And I could claim to have brought the sun from Brussels with me, but I'm afraid that wouldn't be telling the truth. I think you enjoy a lot more sunshine than we do in Brussels, or indeed in my home country of Ireland. But it's great to be here, and thank you for the very warm welcome, and also to acknowledge the timeliness of this visit as Singapore turns 60 this year, and congratulations and many happy returns. It is an honour to be here today and to address you at the start of what is a new European Commission mandate, which began on the 1st of December. So we're all just 3 months into the new mandate at this stage. And we are entering a defining moment, a time of profound challenges and important opportunities. Russia's ongoing war of aggression against Ukraine continues to test our resilience, while democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights face increasing pressure both inside and outside our borders. In this complex environment, the European Commission has set clear priorities for the next 5 years. We stand by Ukraine and will continue supporting them until there is a just and lasting peace, We want to strengthen the EU's competitiveness, close the innovation gap, and foster sustainable economic growth while defending our democratic values and the rule of law throughout the European Union. As Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, the Rule of Law and Consumer Protection, in essence, my mission is to safeguard the very foundations of the European Union. And this includes protecting the 450 million European consumers and ensuring protection of EU citizens' personal data. Here at this illustrious university, I understand you work on innovations that integrate expertise across computer science, digital humanities and law, particularly in the areas of the digital economy, government and society. Your vision to develop a smart nation that fosters human flourishing is one that resonates with me personally. The EU's approach to the digital transition aligns with this vision as we work to foster competitiveness and growth whilst ensuring that individuals remain at the centre of the technological revolution, the bedrock of human flourishing. Digital transformations have fundamentally changed how we live, from how consumers behave to how industries operate and how governments interact with the citizens that they serve. From social media to AI, e-commerce to cryptocurrencies, the exponential pace at which digital transformations are reshaping our economies, governments and societies could seem to be overwhelming. But not to this centre, which is leading discussions on digital technologies, societal impact, governance and regulation. And that is why I'm here with you this afternoon. Innovation is multiplied when like-minded partners share their experience and expertise, the challenges that they have overcome, and indeed the lessons that they have learned. This is the main reason of my visit to Singapore, and it has been the focus of my many meetings today with government representatives, the business community, and indeed civil society. Before we delve into how we can empower businesses and consumers in the digital world, I'd like to say a few words about our work in the European Union on these issues. Over the past number of years, to address the enormous opportunities and some important challenges brought about by the digital transformation, the EU has strengthened its regulatory framework in this area. And let me be clear, regulation is obviously not the solution to everything. Amongst the driving forces for innovation, one would rather think of factors such as access to capital, investment in research and development, or indeed a skilled workforce. But good regulation can support innovation. It can create predictability and legal certainty on the market, which is attractive for investors. It can also foster the confidence of consumers. Therefore, our rulebook is not about restricting, it is rather about enabling. It is about enabling trustworthy AI innovation through the AI Act. It's about the safe sharing of data between the private and public players, including through the development of common data spaces in strategic areas such as health, energy or mobility, and through the Data Governance Act. It's about fair and contestable digital markets where companies, including smaller ones, can compete on a level playing field through the Digital Markets Act. And it's about a safer and a more accountable online environment for users, tackling issues such as the online sale of illegal products or services, the protection of minors, or misleading practices through the Digital Services Act. To mention the main pieces of legislation recently adopted by the EU, for any legislator, whether in Europe, Singapore or elsewhere, balancing individual rights, business needs and public interests is undoubtedly a very complex task, but it is an essential one if we want to seize opportunities and address the risks that I have referred to. Another important aspect in the digital age is protecting consumers. As consumers increasingly live in the digital space, shop online, they face a growing number of unfair practices. Let me give you two examples of practices we intend to address with a forthcoming Digital Fairness Act to fill the gaps of consumer protection in the digital era. First, addictive design. Many digital products and services are designed to keep consumers engaged for as long as possible. For example, with constant push notifications or through what is called infinite scrolling. Our intention is to give consumers more control over their own personal online experience, for example, by giving them the possibility to turn off such features. And we're paying particular attention to the protection of minors online. In particular, we will consider ways to restrict exposure of minors to harmful features, for example, in some video games. And I'm sure most of you here have been confronted with in-app currencies or gambling simulating features such as loot boxes. According to the World Health Organization, some 12% of adolescents are at risk of problematic gaming, and this percentage, regrettably, is growing all the time. A second example is the increasing impact of social media influencers. Influencers have a large following, including minors, and influencing brings responsibility. We need clearer rules on the responsibility of influencers and the businesses that pay them. These are issues which I know are also on the radar of Singaporean authorities, as I've discussed with different interlocutors today. It shows once again how much we can learn from each other, which brings me to the significance of the EU-Singapore relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, Singapore holds immense importance for the European Union, not just as one of our largest trade and investment partners in Southeast Asia, but as our 10th largest trading partner in the globe. Our partnership is built on key milestones, such as the long-standing free trade agreement, through which Singapore serves as the gateway into ASEAN for over 12,000 EU businesses. Our digital partnership and digital trade agreement, the very first of its kind for the EU, highlights the pioneering nature of our relationship. Together, we are setting high standards and new digital trade rules globally. The agreement spans a wide range of issues, from protecting users from spam to open government data, electronic authentication and signatures, paperless trading, and cross-border data flows. These rules complement our free trade agreement, and they take our relationship to the next level. This is all the more relevant as last year, more than half of the total trade and services between the EU and Singapore was digital and accounted for 55% of the total EU-Singapore trade, and for a value of around €45 billion, easily overcoming the 10,000 kilometres that separate Brussels from Singapore. These days, in our borderless digital ecosystem, geography poses no limits. This is also why our cooperation on trusted data flows, which form the backbone of the digital economy, is so important. It's another example of how we can build on our commonalities to both facilitate the life of business and protect the rights of our citizens. I'm thinking in particular of our work to bridge our respective data transfer mechanisms. The joint EU-ASEAN guidance on model contractual clauses for safe data flows that we jointly developed is based on real-life examples and best practices. It has very concrete and tangible results, helping businesses to navigate different regulatory requirements, and has already inspired similar approaches with other regions of the world. In my view, this type of network effect, connecting different transfer mechanisms, is precisely what we need in today's digital economy, where data often flows to multiple destinations and perhaps at the same time. I had the pleasure to discuss earlier today this topic, and indeed others, with Ms. Denise Wong in her capacity as Acting Commissioner of Singapore's Personal Data Protection Commission. The joint statement we issued expresses our ambition to step up our cooperation on several privacy and data transfers related matters. Our digitalisation efforts extend beyond the commercial sphere. As Commissioner for Justice, I'm also looking at the use of AI to improve the quality and efficiency of justice, to shorten the length of proceedings and also to cut costs. I'm thinking of automated case management, legal research, anonymisation of judicial decisions, or the handling of mass claims cases. All this can help judges and other professionals to focus more on their core legal functions, which can benefit the overall quality of justice and indeed improve access to justice. An important initiative in that context is the creation of a common European legal data space, allowing justice practitioners to search European and national laws, which could also be used to develop AI tools for the justice system. During my visit, I learned about Singapore's own digitalisation efforts through my meeting with Ms. Teo, Minister for Digital Development, and I'm excited about the potential for EU-Singapore collaboration also in this area. As I conclude, I'd like to reflect on how my engagement with representatives from politics, business, and also civil society in Singapore has represented the true breadth and depth of our partnerships. During turbulent times, it is the case more than ever that shared aspirations, aims and approaches will continue to serve as the bedrock of these flourishing partnerships. I look forward to hearing your reflections and your thoughts on empowering businesses and consumers across these complex digital ecosystems and how the European Union and Singapore can overcome common challenges and harness shared opportunities in the years to come. Thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to our Q&A and to our moderated discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your insightful, thought-provoking ideas, which will be taken forward in the fireside chat that is going to happen. But before we go on to those part of the proceedings, please allow us again to thank the Dean, Lei Wan, Professor Xie, and Professor Jason Allen Grant for really your support. This event has come together at really short notice, and I really want to thank all of you for being here in this beautiful space where you see Singapore's heritage and you sit in a very, very modern space. So I will now invite on stage Jason Grant Allen, Associate Professor of Law and Director of the Center for Digital Law at the Singapore Management University. Thank you again for your support, and I will invite Commissioner back to continue the conversation.
Many of your comments did resonate both personally with me and also with the work that we do or that we're trying to do at the Centre for Digital Law and at SMU more broadly, and some of our colleagues at other faculties as well. I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to follow up following your comments, and then we'll have some time to open it to the floor as well. The first is a matter of personal interest. So, especially as a university academic engaged in research and also in teaching, could you elaborate on your views of the university as an institution and the university's role as a civil society institution in the digital transformation? Here at the law school, that's less relevant. Some other schools are finding, for example, much of the work that they've traditionally done has moved to the private sector. That's where the data is, that's where the money is, that's where the compute is. But on our side as well, we've seen around the world, particularly in the West, universities in the last 12 months not always managing to hold space for complex debate on contentious matters and keep debate within the bounds of civil and productive debate. So how can universities, faculty, staff, students, and the institution itself engage with other stakeholders in constructive and impactful ways?
Thank you very much. So I think that's the first point to make, is an event like this is evidence that this university is exercising that fundamental freedom. I also think it's important to have a safe space for creative thinking, for innovation, where conventions and the body of knowledge that we had up to now can be challenged. And this is an incubator for that kind of challenge and that creative thinking and that innovation. I also think universities provide perhaps a unique example for collaboration and engagement with the public authorities, but also with the private sector and with other stakeholders, including many of those who are represented here today. So that outreach, that engagement is important, because that is what will lead to change, that is what will lead to progress, is what will lead to innovation. And of course, the fact that you have so many young people in the university, they will constantly challenge, they will look for new ways of doing things, better ways of doing things, and they will challenge existing thinking, and they will innovate, and they will create the innovations of the future. So I think what you're doing is hugely important, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and to have this exchange with you and your colleagues.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us today, and of course to our members of the public and other stakeholder communities who have joined us as well. My next question is hopefully not controversial, but it's a bit of a curly one. You've spoken to several different initiatives in which the EU has been quite active, for example, around data protection regulation, quite lawyerly sort of aspects, such as model clauses for the free flow of data, which is becoming more and more important in a digital economy, which is driven by data and which requires that data move across borders. Abstracting from those more technical and those questions of detail a little bit and zooming to the big picture, my colleague Pasha also mentioned the difficult geoeconomic and indeed geopolitical moment in which we find ourselves. It does seem that the digital economy is becoming more fragmented. Some go so far as to speak of the end of benign globalization. I hope that that's not the case, but this new era in which we find ourselves does present small and medium states with a set of difficult choices. We're also entering an age where it seems that the market dominance, or at least size, of particular platform and infrastructure companies is playing an ever-present role. That's interacting in turn with geoeconomic competition, and indeed the role of the market and the state, respectively, seem to be changing as well. What role do you see European digital policy playing in this dynamic? To put a point on it, is it part of the problem, part of the solution, or is it in the way? And how will Europe go about playing this chosen role into the next few years?
Thanks, Jason. It's a really great question. And yes, we are living in very uncertain times, perhaps even volatile times, and old certainties can no longer be taken for granted. But one thing is sure, the digital economy is here to stay, and it's only going to grow in importance over the years ahead. And if you look at the fact that a whole range of international institutions and multilateral fora like the WTO and the G20, the ASEAN, the European Union, are all considering data-related issues and trying to find ways forward and trying to enter into new agreements and enhance bilateral cooperation, I think it gives us the answer to one question, the why we need to address these issues. The why, I think, is unequivocal when you consider the issues that arise because of the prevalence of data, the importance of it to our economy, to our society, to international trade, to international cooperation, the complex issues then that crop up as a result of that, of data protection, of consumer protection, fundamental rights, AI risks, competition policy, for example, level playing field between different jurisdictions, companies operating cross-border, as so many of them are, and cross-continent. So I think there's an acceptance that all of the issues that I touched on in my opening remarks must be considered and must be addressed. Where there is less agreement is on the how and how we should go about it. And it is true to say that the European Union has, in the last mandate in particular, brought forward a whole suite of measures on the legislative front. And our focus in the current mandate will be to allow that to bed in, to implement it in a fair, even-handed and consistent manner, but also to explore opportunities for simplification, to reduce the burden on businesses. You will know President von der Leyen has asked all of us to make a contribution, for example, to a reduction in the reporting requirement for all businesses of at least 25% and 35% in the case of SMEs, because we know in Europe, in the European Union, we have to improve the competitiveness of our economy. And in the digital sphere, what we have sought to do is to strike the appropriate balance. Yes, we have introduced regulation. We believe that guardrails are important. If you look at AI, for example, so we have an AI Act, which I think is world leading, and some people might question the need to have any regulatory framework at all around AI. But when you think about the risks, they are very obvious, even to our democracies, to the conduct of elections. AI can pose a real risk. It can pose a risk in terms of any inbuilt bias. It can pose a risk in judicial systems if it is not used appropriately. It can create a risk in the impersonation of people without their consent. So there are risks that we have to be clear-eyed about, and we have to be honest about. And that's why we think that there is a need for a regulatory framework to set the guardrails. But within that, then, the focus has to be on fostering innovation and supporting competitiveness and giving businesses the certainty that they need, because they want to know, well, what are the rules? And will these rules be applied consistently? And that will be the focus of the European Union. A lot of work has been done. We now need to coordinate the work across 27 member states, which is pretty complex and challenging. We need to make sure the consistency of application of the different rules. If you take data protection, for example, so GDPR is our rule book, and we are bringing in a new procedural rules regulation to make sure there's coordination and consistency in the application of our data protection laws across the European Union. And then, of course, we're looking to enter more and more international agreements to recognise the progress in other jurisdictions, to facilitate the exchange of data, to facilitate trade and growth and competitiveness. So that's very much the approach that we are adopting. It will have its critics. Others will think that their approach is a better approach. We think that balance is important. Regulation has a role to play, but within that, then, the focus has to be on supporting innovation, entrepreneurship, and fostering the competitiveness of the European economy and how we interact with the rest of the world.
And personally, and I know I would speak for some colleagues as well, I think the prospect of an EU-Singapore digital economy agreement is definitely a space to watch there. Listening to your comments, I thought as well, part of fostering innovation also means potentially recognizing where experimentation maybe hasn't worked, or where a particular technology or business model might have unanticipated negative externalities, as some of our colleagues might say. And I was particularly interested to hear in your opening remarks about potential attention on the infinite scroll and on the algorithmic placement of content, particularly on social media. That brings me to my last question before we open to the floor. How serious is the issue of foreign information manipulation and interference in real terms? And does this problem, I think in the EU you use the acronym of FIMI, which is not like FOMO, but FIMI, how does FIMI intersect with other problem areas, such as online scams or cybersecurity threats, or are they distinct issues?
There are certainly linkages. Foreign information manipulation and interference is a real risk that we have to be alert to, and we need to have the tools to respond to it, but not in a way that encroaches on the fundamental right of freedom of expression, which of course is enshrined in the Charter of Fundamental Rights that we have in the European Union, which celebrates its 25th anniversary this year. And so again, even in tackling potential foreign information interference and manipulation, there is a need to achieve the appropriate balance. And one of the main tasks that President von der Leyen has asked of me is to deliver a democracy shield, to look at what more we can do to protect the democracy within the European Union. That will be complementary to the work that has already been done. You spoke about social media companies and the risks that are there, where you have the amplification of certain content through the use of algorithms. And we have, through the Digital Services Act, an excellent tool now in our armoury to deal with that and to engage with companies who we think are not fulfilling their responsibilities. We are committed to ensuring free and fair elections. That means that people are given all of the information that they need. The individuals, the citizens themselves, need to be equipped with the tools to differentiate between what is true what is misinformation and what is disinformation. But where it's happening at a systemic level, and if it is enabled by platforms using the huge power that they have to amplify content, then we do have a role to play as regulators, and that will be used judiciously and always evidence-based, but we have to use it where appropriate to protect our democracy. So these are real risks, these are real threats, and tackling them in a manner that does not encroach on our fundamental rights is a delicate walk that we have to continue to engage in and to work our way through. And it's a work in progress, but we would be naive to think that there isn't foreign interference in our democratic processes. We know where that has been happening, where the evidence has been pretty transparent, and we have to address that, but in a way that does seek to walk that, what can be a tight balance, and it's a difficult one, but it's one we're committed to doing.
Thank you. About 18 months ago now, I was asked to present some thoughts at a computer science conference on AI and the open society. And of course it is difficult, and of course the open society and its enemies being a classical mid-century work by Karl Popper, it is indeed a tightrope that you have to walk to maintain values of openness in the face of actors who seek to exploit those very features. So thank you, Commissioner McGrath. We have time now for some questions from the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brent. I was a former student leader from the Institute of Technical Education, and I'm also a community volunteer. So my question is on the accessibility of digital services, whether it is accessing bank services or government services. One of the main challenges for Singapore is an aging population. So how can we ensure that these services remain accessible to segments of society which may struggle due to a lack of understanding or awareness of such services? My second question is on the prevalence. Oh, just one question. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important question, and thank you for raising it. And part of the answer lies in investing in digital literacy, trying to get to the hard-to-reach sections of society, providing them with the tools and the resources and the training and the outreach and the education that is needed to enable them to connect. But we have to also accept that that will not be 100% successful, because the digital space is beyond the reach of some people. They simply won't engage or won't seek to access it. And so for critical public services in particular, it is important that we guard against the risk of exclusion, and that we ensure that those services are available to all of the citizens in whatever jurisdiction, so that they can enjoy a good quality of life. And it's a challenge for governments that are looking to save money, to provide services as efficiently as possible, and it is something that I think will wash through over time, because as the current generation age, they will be highly digitally literate, but there is a section of our society that isn't. They deserve respect, they deserve support, but above all else, they deserve equal treatment and access to the very same services that everybody else has the privilege of enjoying in a free and democratic society.
My name is Josh. I'm the Managing Director for the APEC Office of the Future of Privacy Forum, which is a global non-profit organization working on privacy and data protection. In fact, we have an office that's quite well connected in Brussels as well. So with respect, Commissioner, my question is with regard to the Brussels effect. It's something that's been quite recognized globally, especially in the data protection space. But some people are saying that the Brussels effect is in retreat. Some look at the GDPR adequacy rules, and some look at the EU AI Act, and they are saying that it's complicated, it's a bit hard to comply with. Will governments actually follow that as a unique AI fingerprint for legislation around the world? So my personal thoughts on that, it's quite neutral on that, frankly, but curious to know your thoughts about what people are saying regarding the Brussels effect. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Well, what we hear a lot about is the need for simplification of our regulatory system and of the burdens imposed on businesses, in particular from our regulatory system. So that's something that we hear a lot of feedback about. In relation to the digital rule book that we have introduced, yeah, not everyone is a fan of what the EU has done. A lot was introduced in the last 5 years, that is for sure, but it was in response to a rapidly evolving situation and in an environment where technology is omnipresent. If I take my own area of consumer protection, the explosion of e-commerce has presented massive challenges. About 12 million small packages are delivered into the European Union from outside the European Union every single day. And if you think about the product safety issues, the consumer protection issues, the data protection issues, the customs issues, the level playing field issues for European businesses, it's a minefield. And so we are seeking to respond to that, and we've published an e-commerce communication. On the AI Act, I would say that it is a framework. It is risk-based, and I would point to the speech that Ursula von der Leyen gave at the recent AI Action Summit in Paris, which I think was very balanced and perhaps might have surprised people because the emphasis was on supporting innovation and supporting and improving the competitiveness of the European Union. So that is the perspective that we have, the mindset that we have. Whether or not we have got the balance right, I think can only be considered in the fullness of time. And while in some parts of the world there might be a march backwards from that approach to regulation, I think in the fullness of time, the importance of having a stable and predictable regulatory environment is one that is important for businesses. They need to know where they stand, and the consistency of the European Union, I think, comes at a premium. What we are seeing now, for example, when it comes to international trade, is more and more countries are looking to enter into agreements with the European Union. Why? Because they see us as a safe, reliable, trusted partner who makes commitments and then honours those commitments. And in the world in which we live, that's not something that can be taken for granted anymore. And that will continue to be the European Union's approach. We will absolutely continue to reflect and examine the regulatory model that we have, continue to consider feedback, continue to consider whether we have got the overall balance correct. But there won't be any knee-jerk reaction because I do think that premium on stability and certainty is one that will serve us well in the long run.
I'm Tom from the British High Commission. One of the questions I have is around how do you make sure that the legislation, the FTAs, all of these things relating to tech stay up to date in the best way, because obviously tech moves fast, innovation is fast. How do we make sure that in 5 years' time these FTAs, these digital agreements are still going to be valid and relevant and actually contributing?
Thanks, Tom. That's a really important question, and I think it's about agreeing on the common principles. And where you agree on the common principles, then it is not relatively easy, but it is achievable to update any agreements that have been entered into. So the foundations and the fundamentals of your common approach should be agreed. And that's why I think the joint work that has been done by the EU and Singapore in relation to the model contractual clauses that you have, the standard contractual clauses that we have in the European Union, that joint guide, I think, is an excellent example of a flexible approach that establishes very clearly the principles underpinning data flows. And as technology evolves and changes, as it inevitably will, we have a template that can be easily adjusted. And so I think that is the only answer to that question, because you're absolutely right. The pace of change in technology is only going to quicken, and we have to be in a position to respond to that. But that's why the bedrock has to be the fundamentals, has to be a shared understanding of what are the important principles. And once you have that agreed, then I think you can pivot, you can adjust, you can modernise, you can reform and change, I think, in a reasonably straightforward manner.
Commissioner McGrath, thank you very much. We've skirted through some of the most pressing issues of our generation in a brief half hour. I'd now invite our Dean, Professor Lee, to come forward. We've got a small token for you.
Yes, hi, commissioners. Yes. All right.
Oh, yes, and likewise.